Well, Nancy, let me just be clear. I'm going to say it. She ain't going to say it. Nancy Pelosi, everybody talks about how the Speaker Emerita, she's so strategic. She can count. And yes, she did all of that when she was the Speaker in Congress. But my question is, where is your calculator now? Because Democrats are about to lose the dang on House. And for her to sit on this podcast, we'll play the sound about how, it's up to the, I don't deal in presidential politics. But she helped orchestrate, I'm going to say it.
This cycle.
She played in presidential politics this cycle. And she helped orchestrate the very public demise of the president.
That's right.
Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and as the kids would say, the tea is currently being spilled. See, I'm hip with the kids. You guys thought I was an old man, an old grandpa, a cranky guy about the Kamala Harris campaign. And it's absolutely amazing what has been revealed so far. We have warring factions from the Biden camp to the Obama camp to the Harris camp themselves, and even Nancy Pelosi is in the mix. And that's what I want to talk about today, because apparently this campaign was incompetently managed from top to bottom. They raised well over $1 billion in just over 100 days, but somehow ended up $18 million in debt. And it turns out that the leadership of the Harris campaign was diluting and maybe even lying to top donors, to people who wanted to know what their strategy was, because they were totally inadequate to the job of running a presidential campaign, which is not surprising because Harris's 2020 campaign was an absolute disaster. So why would we be surprised, even with all the media propaganda, that she would run this into the ground as well? Now, of course, this tea is from Lyon's Tea Exchange. More on that a little bit later, but let's get into the nonsense that we saw.
The whole endorsing her 30 minutes after he dropped out, I think that was a big FU to the party. You don't want me, here's somebody that you may not like.
Look, there are so many stories coming out about the incompetence of the Kamala Harris campaign. It's difficult to know where to start, but one of the things that I found so amazing is that they obviously outraised the Trump campaign. The Trump campaign raised about $380 million, but they ended up with $30 million in reserves because they only spent about $350 million. The Harris campaign raised $1 billion, I forget the exact number, and they ended up about $20 million in debt. This is maddening in a number of ways, but apparently a lot of the money was blown on high-end celebrity endorsements and staff, and completely inefficiently on staff. According to this tweet, of the $380 million that the evil orange man made, only $10 million was spent on staff. Conversely, of the over $1 billion that Harris raised, about $580 million of that was spent on employees, on staff, which again, if you had Obama levels of enthusiasm, you would think you could have Obama levels of volunteers, but we all know that that was a complete and utter farce. Now, people are pointing out and highlighting this or that, and one of the things that's getting so much attention is the Call Her Daddy podcast, because the Harris campaign apparently paid them $100,000 to recreate their set in a Washington, D.C. hotel room, and just from the look of it, you can tell that that is money that is poorly spent. Now, in addition to that, I also want to point out another big red flag, because if you are given anything of value from somebody, that is considered a sponsorship, and YouTube requires you to say this is a paid promotion in the top of your video. You got to check that box before you get started, but that is not something that comes up on the podcast or any of the clips. Now, for those of you who are saying, Sean, she didn't pay for the interview, she just paid for the set to be reconstructed, I need you to understand, fictional person that I just made up, that has no bearing on what I just said. So this particular tea, the Lyon's Tea Exchange thing that I'm going to tell you about in just a little bit, I didn't accept any money for this. In fact, I didn't even accept any commission on the sales despite getting a promo code. But because I got the tea for free from the owner of the company, I have to put that tag on this video, because anything of value that you're given requires the sponsor tag if you go into YouTube's terms of service. But apparently that doesn't apply for the Call Her Daddy podcast. Now, really quickly, if you guys don't know, Lyon's Tea Exchange is actually owned by Sydney Watson. She is a friend of the channel and a YouTuber. You probably heard of her. And normally I would not promote another YouTuber's products unless they paid me big. However, in this particular case, it's actually really good. Like, Sydney Watson has said that she's obsessed with tea and all of that, and that definitely comes through in her product. The packaging is absolutely beautiful. It makes a great gift for people, but the tea itself is so aromatic and you could tell it's high quality just by looking at it. And even the bag is high quality, that this is something that I think a lot of you would enjoy, if I'm being perfectly honest. Now, I'm somebody who likes my classic types of tea, Earl Grey, New York breakfast, green tea, try to keep it simple. But honestly, she packed in this bonus one for me, which was a raspberry elderflower rose or rosé, and it's really good. And trust me, I'm not into that foo-foo whatever kind of teas or whatever, but the facts are what they are, and I'm totally sold on this particular product. Now again, I was not paid for this review. I did receive free samples, but I actually think it makes a good holiday gift. I negotiated a promo code for you guys. If you put in AJW, you will get 10% off. My recommendation is you get 3 boxes that you know you're going to like based on your flavor profile, but you throw in one of the interesting ones, one of the unusual ones just to try it, because you'll probably be won over just like I was. Again, that's Lyons Tea Exchange, LYONS TEA exchange.com, and use promo code AJW for 10% off. Now that we're done spilling the tea, let's get into the Kamala tea. Get it? Tea. It's comedy, people. Oh, also, a little bit of a bonus. Sydney actually packs all this tea herself by hand, and she actually posted on her Instagram story, but only for close friends, the mess of boxes that she has to pack by hand in her garage. So you can also add a little bit of stress to her life by flooding her with orders using my promo code, because I find that to be hilarious. Also, my bad, Sydney, for screenshotting your close friend's story. Forgive me.
Nancy Pelosi placing the blame on President Biden and his late exit from the race. Pelosi telling the New York Times, quote, "Had the president gotten out sooner, there may have been other candidates in the race. The anticipation was that if the president were to step aside, that there would be an open primary."
And thank God for Joe Biden that he came out and, yes, endorsed his VP, because these people wanted an open primary.
And
for where?
And when were we going to have an open primary between July 21st, when he stepped down, and August 20th, when the convention was going to happen? When was that going to happen? And anybody who's suggesting that clearly wasn't looking at a calendar. Neither were they familiar.
I'm looking for the magic wand that apparently the Democrats on Capitol Hill think that we have. I surely hope that Democrats eke out the majority in the House. But if they don't, I think the people that helped, the people that had so much to say about the president and the vice president earlier this summer, I think that those people need to take a back seat.
You see here Nancy Pelosi making the case to sort of blame Joe Biden, but it's a backhanded compliment because she's blaming Joe Biden for allowing Kamala Harris to be the nominee.
Right. Well, thank you so much for having me. And what's left unsaid is that she is not forcefully saying that Harris would have been the strongest candidate after a rigorous process. She's not saying definitively that it would have been her. She says it might have been her, but, maybe there was an alternative. Maybe it was Josh Shapiro or maybe Gretchen Whitmer, someone who could forcefully litigate the case against Donald Trump. And if you truly believe that Trump is an existential threat, and that's what Democrats have been saying for the past couple of years, then you should have had that process instead of just coronating somebody.
So this interview on Fox News is going absolutely viral right now, because while a lot of people speculated about the dynamics and the disaster that is the Harris campaign, having somebody on the inside tell us what went down has obviously been intriguing to a great number of people. Again, how you waste over $1 billion and end up in debt in just over 100 days is absolutely crazy. So we want to know this information, and this woman who donated and raised a bunch of money for Harris is definitely delivering it. Now, one of the things that she highlights is the fact that Nancy Pelosi probably was not on board with Kamala Harris. They wanted to do this open primary thing with 107 days left to go just before the convention, and Biden essentially, according to this account, screwed over the party on purpose after he was forced out by essentially endorsing Harris, thus sticking them with her as a candidate because he wanted to hurt the Democratic Party for their betrayal against him. Now, I told you over and over again that this was in fact a coup against Joe Biden, and we will find out more and more exactly how right I was about that. And the reason I knew that is because Joe Biden was talking about how he was staying in the race up until he was forced out of the race.
Let me close with this. I know I'm not a young man. State the obvious. Well, I know. Well, I don't walk as easy as I used to. I don't speak as smoothly as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to. But I know what I do know. I know how to tell the truth. I know right from wrong. And I know how to do this job. I know how to get things done. And I know, like millions of Americans know, when you get knocked down, you get back up.
Now, one of the other things that I find to be interesting about this particular interview is that it confirms and affirms stuff that I told you all along, because I actually read the campaign book Lucky, How Joe Biden Barely Won the Presidency, which is the fact that Joe Biden never liked Kamala Harris, never wanted her on the ticket, and as we saw in that book, he tried everyone and anyone before Harris, ultimately being forced to pick her because he already promised to pick a woman, and then the Black Lives Matter riots happened, so people started demanding that he pick a black woman, and technically she was the highest ranking black woman. Again, I know people are going to point out she's half Indian. I totally understand that, in the Democratic Party. Well, it turns out that the Biden team did everything they could to sabotage her. There were a bunch of leaks coming out against her, and one of the reasons why she had such high staff turnover, over 90% of her staff fleeing, was due to the fact that the Biden team was trying to set her up for failure as punishment for her going out of her way to, in a mean spirit, in a bad faith way, call him a racist on the debate stage.
What is the relationship? What has been the relationship throughout the campaign, and what do you think the relationship is today between Biden world and Kamala Harris world?
Well, I have friends, in both worlds. And let me tell you, the relationship was terrible even before the campaign. There was backstabbing. They wanted to hand her the most, least favorable agenda. The legislative priorities. She was stuck with immigration, civil rights, like none of that went
before she was even a candidate,
exactly.
You're saying, as vice president.
There was a lot of backstabbing we saw in the press. People were leaking stuff all the time. The White House was leaking like a sieve when it came to Kamala Harris. And finally, in the final year, she was able to stabilize and stop the bleeding of her staff, because there was a lot of turnover as well. And we saw the press reports about that. And things have finally started to calm down. And I actually think President Biden, the whole endorsing her 30 minutes after he dropped out, I think that was a big FU to the party. You don't want me, here's somebody that you may not like. But deal with it,
Suggesting that he's sticking the party with Kamala
Kind of
Harris.
like sticking it to the man.
So one of the reasons why this is happening, one of the reasons why she's doing an interview, is because she got a lot of her friends and associates to give big money under the promise that Harris would win. And the Harris campaign essentially gaslit all the donors, saying that she had a great chance, that she was up there in the polls. They had their own internal data, which is odd because we heard leaked internal data from the Harris team that showed that they knew that they were behind the whole time.
The truth is, this is just an epic disaster. This is a $1 billion disaster. Actually, it was $1.018 billion, I think, right? There were $20 million or $18 million in debt.
Right.
It's incredible. And I raised millions of that. I have friends that I have to be accountable to and to explain what happened, because I told them it was a margin of error race. I was promised, Jen O'Malley Dillon promised all of us that Harris would win.
And by the way, it's absolutely crucial that you guys understand that the Harris campaign had been tanking since the convention. Since she did not receive a bump at that point in time, her poll numbers started dropping dramatically. We all understand that she surged in the polls after Joe Biden dropped out in the 6 weeks leading up to the convention when she wasn't doing any interviews, but this is because people said that they would rather have a generic Democrat versus Joe Biden, and when she wasn't talking to the press, that's exactly how she presented herself, not to mention a historic propaganda campaign in order to rehabilitate her image, denials of all her different various stances, but as soon as she started talking, as soon as she started putting out policies, she started tanking in the polls, and the good pollsters had her losing for over 2 months prior to the election. We're talking Atlas Intel, which once again proved to be the most accurate pollster in the third election cycle in a row, Rasmussen, which is often labeled a right-leaning poll, and all these other ones captured her decline, and even the polls that had her dramatically up on Trump, or up 4 points on Trump, actually showed us in the data that she was polling well under Hillary at that point in time in 2016 and under Biden as well. So she was losing for a very long time. I find it absolutely fascinating that the delusion went all the way up to election night. And the question that I have for you guys is, did the Harris campaign actually know for a fact that she was losing and try to gas everyone up? Or was the Harris campaign believing their own hype, huffing their own farts, drinking their own Kool-Aid? Let me know what you think down in the comments below.
She even put videos out saying that Harris would win. I believed her. My donors believed her. And so they wrote massive checks. I feel like a lot of us were misled. And even on the night of election night, Will, I looked somebody in the eye and I said, are we going to do this? Are we going to pull it off? She told me yes. And I asked somebody else, like, how are you feeling? He's like, we're going to win Iowa. And I was like, what?
Did they believe this going in? Was there a real sense of false confidence on the side of Kamala Harris? Or did they know they were in store for disaster?
Now look, the Ann Seltzer Iowa poll is probably going to go down in history as one of the biggest blunders for a pollster's reputation, right next to Alan Lichtman with his keys to presidential re-election or election, because they've proven to be unmitigated disasters. But the Ann Seltzer poll, by the way, significantly worse, because Lichtman, you could make the argument, misread his own keys, because he kept saying that the economy in the short term and the long term was in the good, and those were keys in Kamala's favor, when in reality, nobody in the American population felt that way, so those were bad readings of his own indicator. But that particular poll, for them to believe that is insane. Now, for those of you who follow me on Twitter at IamSean90, you know when that poll dropped and everybody was saying it was BS, I said, hey guys, it's actually better if we pretend that this poll is real, if we treat it like it's real, act like we're behind, to make sure to get people to turn out to vote. But I did go through the crosstabs and I realized that one of the number one issues in that poll of the people that they selected, of those surveyed, was defending democracy. And that is a big indicator that you are well oversampling Democrats, because the number one issue in this election was the economy, was inflation, and that was repeated over and over and over again. And then you have an outlier poll with an outlier sample telling you that they're in favor or they're voting based on an outlier issue. Obviously, that was a giant red flag. But apparently, they were telling people that were giving them money that Harris was going to win Iowa.
Did they believe this going in? Was there a real sense of false confidence on the side of Kamala Harris? Or did they know they were in store for disaster?
I was wondering about that. I was like, I asked them, are you privy to internal numbers that I am not seeing? Because I study this so carefully, and I just wasn't seeing any basis for that level of confidence. And I also want to remind our viewers that, the Trump campaign was touting all of these incredible empirical data weeks before election night. What Harris is touting was the door knocking. She didn't say anything really about early voting. Now I know it's because there was nothing much to say.
So this is 100% true. If you guys followed the data, which I was reposting a lot on Twitter, you would have known that the Democrats' lead in early voting as compared to 2020 was either non-existent or by such thin margins that obviously they were set up for failure. And the Democratic Party tried to gaslight everybody and say, oh no, Democrats vote on election day, even though that's never been the case. I mean, I had people telling me about Souls to the Polls, which takes people from black churches to voting, and how that was down in historic lows in the state of Georgia, and that would be an unmitigated disaster for them. Same was true of Philadelphia. Yet lefty after lefty would say, no, trust us, all those independents that are outvoting Democrats that shouldn't be outvoting Democrats are definitely coming out for Democrats for some reason. Now, conversely, on the flip side of this, the reason why the Republicans were touting the early voting data is because they were pushing this bank your vote campaign, trying to get their supporters out early. Trump was tweeting it out, and this was absolutely crucial to the victory because if you'll remember, Republicans are the ones who usually treat Election Day like a sacred holy holiday and try to vote the most on there. And the fact of the matter is, a Tuesday in the middle of the week can lead to disaster if you're planning your whole voting schedule around it. It's ultimately going to lead to you probably not voting if you're on the margins anyway. So it was really smart of the Republicans to actually embrace early voting, use the Democrats' tactics against them, and essentially win the turnout battle against the Democratic Party.
I asked you what the relationship was between Biden world and Kamala Harris world, and you told me it was bad. It was bad predating the campaign. Where does Obama world fit in this? There's I don't want to break the Democratic Party into these, three fiefdoms, because there's probably more. Nancy Pelosi is a huge power player. But Barack Obama, the Obama world, is a huge player. How do they fit in the tension or the happiness of Democrats?
That's a really good question. I want to point out that they waited 3 days. Michelle and Barack Obama waited 3 days to endorse Kamala Harris. It was a silence heard around the world. And prior to Biden's endorsement that no one really anticipated, they were vetting people like Mark Kelly. Kamala Harris wasn't at the top of the ticket. So Biden's endorsement of Harris caught a lot of people off guard, even the chieftains of the party. I really think it was a big F you to everyone. I'm so sorry.
It's all right. I think I'm getting a vivid picture.
I didn't finish the word.
Specifically when it comes to why.
Now, look, other than the total mismanagement of money in terms of how much they allocated to staff and didn't allocate, by the way, to get out the vote efforts, despite the fact that Joy Reid said that they ran a perfect campaign because Queen Latifah endorsed her.
And I think it's important to say that, anyone who has experienced or been in the United States for any period of time and experienced this country's history and knows it cannot have believed that it would be easy to elect a woman president, let alone a woman of color. Let's just be clear. And nothing that was true yesterday about how flawlessly this campaign was run is not true now. I mean, this really was an historic, flawlessly run campaign. Queen Latifah never endorses anyone. She came out and endorsed. She had every prominent celebrity voice. She had the Taylor Swiftie to the Swifties. She had the Beehive. You could not have run a better campaign in that short period of time. And I think that's still true.
The Harris campaign also incinerated money on celebrity endorsements. One of the things that people, I guess, don't really realize is that a lot of these celebrities that come out and speak on behalf of Kamala Harris, and even the news interviews, are actually paid campaign ads. In fact, that Oprah Winfrey spot that we talked about and we laughed about, that was paid for by Kamala Harris to the tune of $1 million. There are reports, they're not confirmed yet, but we will find out when we see the FEC filings, that Beyonce was paid to give a 3-minute speech in Houston, which, by the way, ultimately ended up leading to Kamala Harris getting booed because a bunch of people in the crowd showed up for what they thought was supposed to be a free Beyonce concert. And in fact, in the articles that talk about the campaign incinerating money, they talk about the fact that these concerts absolutely killed them. And what was the purpose of the concerts? Really think about it. It was to juice Kamala Harris's crowd size numbers so that she could pretend that she had more enthusiasm than Donald Trump. Now, look, a lot of people equate crowd size to success electorally when that's just not the case. Ron Paul, one of the original guys who ran one of these type of campaigns, drew insane crowds of young people who were super enthusiastic about him in 2008 and 2012, and he got absolutely killed. Bernie Sanders always draws a crowd, and guess what? He got killed. And by the way, if you're saying Bernie got cheated by the Democrats, no, he didn't. The reason he lost is because black Democratic primary voters voted for Hillary overwhelmingly and voted for Joe Biden. Trump in 2020, he could draw bigger crowds than Joe Biden, but guess what? He did not win that election. In this particular case, Harris's crowd numbers in some cases were outranking Donald Trump, but the facts are what they are. Those people came to see celebrities, and that crowd size was not representative of enthusiasm. So we have $500 million spent on staff doing absolutely nothing, setting up concerts and TV appearances, and then the other $500 million is being spent on concerts and crazy things, celebrity endorsements, all this nonsense that didn't move anyone. I mean, really think about it, guys. You know that the celebrities are supporting the Democratic Party. Did you need Kamala Harris to pay all of them so that they could hang around with her while she's failing on the issues in the polling since, again, the Democratic convention? If anything, all the celebrities going out of their way to bend over backwards to do concerts or not do concerts in the case of Beyonce for Harris ended up churning people off, churning them away, and made her seem even more fake and less authentic. Remember, the celebrity campaigns for the Democrats are as old as time, but no candidacy was more influenced by celebrities than the Obama candidacy. And a lot of people bought that because Obama had charisma. They thought he was cool, and they're like, that's why these cool people are hanging around with them. But they did the same thing for Hillary Clinton. They did the same thing for Joe Biden, and now they've done the same thing for Kamala Harris, so people realize that this is just paid sponsorships. It's like when they advertise a cell phone company or toothpaste. It is not real. Another alleged revelation that has leaked out, again, about the Harris campaign is the fact that apparently they tried to do what people thought was very smart, which was select Josh Shapiro as the VP candidate for her, but Josh Shapiro supposedly refused the job, and he gave her the most "I don't want to be attached to your sinking ship, your campaign" excuse that you could possibly give, which was he didn't want to leave being governor of Pennsylvania. Listen, guys, I gotta be perfectly honest with you. When somebody says that, it's the equivalent of in a breakup saying, "It's not you, it's me." It's definitely you. It's definitely Kamala Harris. If there was a better chance to win, Shapiro would have jumped on board with that. But the facts are what they are. And in fact, I told you this earlier in this whole thing when people were trying to push out Biden, that no good candidate would try to jump in this late to right the sinking ship, because all the good candidates, or the people who think they're good candidates, like Shapiro, like Bashir in Kentucky, like Gavin Newsom, who I think is a terrible candidate, but he thinks he's a good candidate, or Gretchen Whitmer, those people think that they can win a Democratic primary straight up outright. So why would they take this opportunity to run a dying campaign that is basically doomed from the start? Kamala Harris can't win a Democratic primary. Again, she won 0 states, didn't even make it to Iowa when she ran in 2020. So of course, she was the only one to jump on board this grenade and take it one for the team, for the Democrats, and being the sucker that ended up losing to Trump.
Philadelphia, we got work to do.
We're ready to rumble, y'all.
I'm Mayor Sherelle Parker, here with leaders from across our region. Kamala Harris is on the road to victory.
And the road goes through Pennsylvania.
And in Pennsylvania, we're united behind her.
The woman that's tough and can lead.
Are we ready to fight for it?
She is the right person at the right time for this job.
It's going to do right by labor. It's going to do right by working people.
And I can't think of a better partner than our Governor Josh Shapiro.
Remember, there was actually a leaked ad, and people speculated that it actually came from Josh Shapiro's team about him being chosen as the VP nominee. But now, in hindsight, that ad, which looked very professional, very likely ended up coming from the Harris team, and he ended up just refusing that particular job. Essentially, the theory was back in the day that Shapiro wanted the job, so he leaked this ad so people could get excited about it.
His policies have not only supported the working class, but have set standards for progressive leadership that benefits all citizens.
Build up your building trade.
IBW for Kamala Harris.
Montgomery County. Bucks.
County.
Delco.
Chester.
South Philly. North Philly.
We're getting behind Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris for president. And Josh Shapiro.
Josh Shapiro.
Josh Shapiro for vice president. Now we need you. Let us and Kamala Harris know you stand with her. Together, we can do this. We are one city.
One region.
But it turns out it might have been the case that he was the first pick, and then Harris had this ad put together, and then they leaked the ad from the Harris team, but then Shapiro rejected the offer, so they ended up with Tim Walz. Now, at the time, I actually thought that Tim Walz would improve her chances with Muslims because he quite literally changed the Minnesota flag to look like the Somali flag in order to bend the knee to the Muslims over in Minnesota, and that's why she ended up picking him over Shapiro. And again, this is speculative right now, although these inside sources seem to be reliable, but it just goes to show you that nobody behind the scenes wanted to be a part of this, and everybody was fighting with each other because Kamala Harris is a terrible candidate. Now, unfortunately, I may have gotten caught up in retweeting some unverified reports about Tim Walz. I wish that they were true, but I don't have any verification for it, so I'm gonna have to leave out the potential back and forth, the feud between Kamala and Walz, because right now we don't have any confirmation of that. But we know that this campaign was a disaster. We know that you have the struggling forces, and we also know that Team Biden was not happy with Harris from the jump as their VP pick and didn't want to surrender the nomination, and decided, possibly according to this, to surrender it to Harris as revenge for the coup against him. But again, those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the absolute chaos that was the Harris campaign. Till next time.